Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. I'm your host, Ariane Aramburo. Today's guest is Morgan Turner. Morgan is a co-founder of the Alaska Birth Collective, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting pregnancy and postpartum care, and she sits on the board of Postpartum Support International's Alaska chapter. With extensive training in perinatal mental health, pregnancy, and infant loss, Morgan is deeply committed to ensuring that every birthing person receives compassionate mental health care and support throughout the perinatal journey. Please welcome to the podcast today, Morgan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I love this topic. This is kind of, a piggyback off of why we wanted to start a parenting podcast. I don't know if you know my story, but I went through postpartum depression after the birth of my daughter, and it kind of blew the lid wide open on perinatal mental health. So I'm super excited to chat with you. Before we kind of get into the nitty gritty and some of the talking points, just let our viewers and listeners know a little bit more about you. Are you born and raised Alaska?
So I am not born, but I have lived here over half of my life now.
Okay, well, you're Alaskan.
Yeah. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot, but moved here in high school. So I've been here ever since, raising my 4 kids here with my husband, and we live in Eagle River. I
grew up in Eagle River. Yeah, that's the hometown.
Yeah. So I just graduated from Alaska Pacific University with a master's in counseling psychology. This was sort of like a midlife career change. And I've done lots of things. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. I worked in the insurance industry. And then with the birth of my 3rd child, who's turning 10 tomorrow.
Oh, my daughter turns 10 in September, the 2 digits.
I know. She's my 3rd, but it's still, is every time you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Her birth really was transformative and empowering after 2 births that were just really kind of traumatic and left me feeling like broken and maybe something was wrong with me. So I had this 3rd baby and I was like, oh my gosh, birth is transformative and it can be empowering and it doesn't have to be something that's scary. And I was obsessed with birth and I was like, yes, everyone should feel this way at least once in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And I rode the high of that birth for years. And if I, really think about it or talk about it, that feeling comes back, just feeling like everything went the way it was supposed to go. I was really supported by my care team and my partner. So I became a childbirth educator and a birth and postpartum doula and really just jumped, feet first, head first, right into birth work. So that was in 2015. I built a doula business, and then I started the Alaska Birth Collective in 2016, a month before my 4th baby was born.
Oh, wow.
And we were sitting on the couch in my friend Jamie's house, and we were just all talking about how we wished there was a place we could go for resources to find out, Alaska actually has a really great selection of care providers that do home birth, birth center birth, hospital birth. There is a provider for you in this town, but you might not easily find them.
Right.
And that was, it took me my 3rd baby to find a care team that I felt really supported by. So it was kind of born. We were all sitting there with all of our kids, and we just decided to start this nonprofit. We've done baby fairs and little educational events for moms, and it's sort of, right now it's kind of in a transition because I've been in graduate school. Yeah. So we're kind of in a rebuilding phase. Post-COVID was hard for in-person things. So we're trying to get it, that back into the momentum and along with graduating, so now I'm also a mental health therapist, and I specialize in perinatal mental health. So I'm building a private practice and trying to rebuild Alaska Birth Collective a little bit, and raising all my children.
Man, well, you can tell you're passionate about it. I love that. We need more of that. Ton of different ways that we can go. But first, let's kind of backtrack. You had mentioned about your birth story, and for a lot of women and moms, I think hearing other people speak about that, especially when you had mentioned it was, for your first two, was almost traumatic. For what you want to divulge and give, can you take me kind of back to that? What was that? Because I feel like you don't hear that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first son, he is 23 now. So I've been a mom for a really long time, but I was 21. I was really young. I took a childbirth class, and it was mostly like, here's how you prepare for the epidural. And it wasn't really comprehensive birth education. So, it was kind of like, sort of like that traditional cascade of interventions. Like, labor wasn't really progressing, so I had Pitocin, and then the Pitocin was upsetting the baby, and so then, we had to stop the Pitocin, and, it was just like this cascade of interventions, one thing after another, and nothing was really explained to me. Everything was just being done to me and happening to me without a conversation.
Yeah.
And after that birth, I was in a lot of pain, and, I went back to the doctor, I was like, gosh, my hip is hurting, I don't feel like myself, and they were like, yeah, it's probably normal, and, pain 6 months after birth is not normal.
Right.
And I felt very dismissed, and I think that part of that was because I was unmarried and I was 21 years old, that I could be dismissed as just, maybe uneducated or that I didn't know enough, and, so I kind of dismissed it too, I
guess this is what it is.
Yeah.
So you just kind of sucked it up and kept going.
Yes.
With life.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I remember I was working, and sometimes I would even limp because my hips hurt so bad. Nobody told me go to a pelvic floor physical therapist. So with baby number 2, which was 9 years later, I was 30. I did a really comprehensive childbirth class, 12 weeks. Learned all the things. I switched care providers, and then I ended up with a complication, and so I was induced at 36 weeks. So everything that I had worked so hard for just wasn't quite going the way I wanted. This time, though, I was super educated, and I really asked a lot of thoughtful questions. I didn't let anyone start anything or do anything until we could have a conversation about it. I did have a complication. I did need to be induced. But there are a lot of options and pathways to take. So we had all those conversations. So I felt a little bit better after that birth, but just gosh, is my body broken? Is something wrong with me? And during that time, I really was reflecting about my first birth, and I was having my second birth and then reflecting on my first birth was when I really had the realization that that first birth was really traumatic. Yeah. And it was scary, and I didn't know what was going on.
And this is 9 years later. You're having these thoughts of your first birth.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I was like, wow. And I didn't realize how much of that I was carrying with me. So that second birth, I was like, okay, so this is a big deal. And my second birth, second time babies generally come out a little bit easier. And that was true. But that left me feeling broken, like something was wrong with me. And kind of thought that, I shouldn't have any more kids, and that, maybe I'm just not cut out for giving birth or being pregnant. And, but I really, still wanted another baby. And so that third baby, this is quite the silly story, but I was 28 weeks pregnant, and I was having these very vivid, daydreams that I would just give birth alone at home instead of going to the hospital, because I was so afraid to go back to the hospital. And I was doing this for quite a while. I was like, I'll just have the baby, and then I'll just be like, oops, she just came out,
Here she is.
And I had that realization that
Yeah.
if I am this scared to go to the hospital, that like I have to do something different. So I switched to out of hospital midwives and decided to have a birth center birth at 28 weeks pregnant with my third baby.
Wow.
Those appointments were transformative. We talked about my first birth. We talked about my second birth. We talked about my fears right now. And the midwives were supportive. They believed me. And they were like, you can absolutely do this. They believed in me from the start. And that helped me believe in myself.
Yeah.
And so my third baby, she did come pretty quickly. It was like a 4.5, 5-hour birth. And I didn't get all the perks of a birth center, which, like the beautiful tub and everything.
Yeah.
She was born pretty quickly after I got there. But, there were no interventions. Nobody doing things to me without my permission or without consent, without even a conversation, it was just like this really, really beautiful moment in my life. And it was really transformative. And it really just set the course for my life, and so I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to support so many moms over the last 7 years. And yeah, so.
And your fourth, what was your fourth?
So my fourth baby was born at home.
Okay, so the last two were home births.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and she was a big baby and she was super hard to push out. And so I always tell people, I'm like, look, that birth was on paper perfect, right?
Yeah.
Like I was at my home. I got to get in my bed right after my baby was born. Like my mom and my doula and brought me fresh fruit and that was lovely. But it was a hard birth.
Yeah.
So it can be both things, right? And that little one, she'll be 9 this year.
Oh, wow.
So doula work was going so well. COVID really put a damper on the availability of doulas to go like to the hospital. And so I was like, you know what? I never finished my degree. I'm going to go finish my degree. So I finished my bachelor's degree that I had started, 20 years ago. And I finished that and I was like, oh, I'm going to go to grad school. And I knew I had that thought for a while that I was like, oh, I think I should be a therapist. And so many of my clients would have postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. And, as a doula, I'm not qualified to help them.
Right.
And so I was trying to find them resources. Sometimes I took them to the emergency room if things were really bad, and so it was abundantly clear to me that we needed more mental health care providers that specialize in perinatal mental health. And I knew I could do that. And grad school is super hard in your 40s. My brain is not as sharp as it used to be, so it took a lot of hard work and dedication. It took a lot of sacrifice from my family who supported me through this journey. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm just super grateful that I was able to do this. I told you earlier that Jocelyn Riley, who you've had on the podcast, was my supervisor. She's an amazing therapist.
She is.
And I feel so lucky that I got to do my internship with her. And yeah, I have a lot of peers and mentors that I, look up to. And I'm just excited to be contributing to this work that I think is really, really important. I think early motherhood is really isolating. And, if you're home, generally your partner has to go back to work really, really soon, right? And it's lonely to be at home with a baby alone or a baby and a toddler.
Right. And you just have given birth, your body and your hormones are like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And so, well, congratulations. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing your birth stories. The perinatal mood disorders, like you were mentioning for moms and new moms or anyone listening, or talk a little bit about that and how does one recognize, for me, I was like, is this the baby blues? But you know your body.
Yeah.
When you're feeling off and when kind of something's not getting back right.
And I think, especially as women, we've been conditioned to think like, it's me.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things to look for is like, is this impacting your life? are you able to experience joy, right? Like baby blues are very normal, right? Like you're going to be teary those first couple weeks, and that's okay. That is that hormone dump that happens after birth. But by about 2 weeks, those levels should be kind of okay, and you should be like feeling like more back to yourself. So if it's about that 2-week mark, the tears are not going away, you're not feeling like yourself, you're not experiencing joy, right? Early parenthood is chaos, right?
Yeah.
There's no sleeping.
Yeah.
If you're trying to nurse, like it's so complicated. Yes. That's another thing, right? Like if I've struggled with the nursing.
I did too.
And you feel like a failure. So, all of these things, when they add up, can turn into depression. And I think, one, if it's impacting your life, like you're doubting yourself, right? If you're thinking like, oh, I'm just a bad mother, that is depression.
Yeah.
You're not a bad mother. You're doing so much, right? You're caring for this newborn while you're, recovering from childbirth. You're doing all these things for your child. You're not a bad mother. But that is often sometimes what we hear in our brains when we're suffering with depression. And so that's kind of one of those things that I like to ask people. I'm like, how do you think you're doing as a mom? Like, how's it going? And the people that are the most critical, it's generally that's some sort of depression or anxiety, because no, you're a great mom. You're doing all these things to take care of your baby, right? Like nursing is so hard. We're trying to nurse. We're up all night. We're cleaning bottles. We're changing diapers,
And I feel like you're so busy. You're not even necessarily thinking, hey, I need to go and see someone for this.
Well, how can you, right? Like there's no time to be like, oh, I should sit down and make an appointment. And if you have traditional OB care, you're not seeing anyone for 6 weeks.
Right.
And then that 6 weeks, that's a long time for a mood disorder to develop. So I really encourage people to think about, like, with your partner or your support person, like, when will be the time that, like, maybe I need to go see my care provider again? Thinking about mood disorders, we know, like, 1 in 5 moms will have a mood disorder or, anxiety after pregnancy. So kind of being proactive, like thinking about your risk factors, have you experienced depression in your life before? Have you experienced any traumatic events in your life, right? Like there's a bunch of little things that can make you more susceptible.
Right.
So having these plans and these conversations during pregnancy so that you can like, oh, let's not suffer for months until we go get help. Like,
and how do you talk about the shame surrounding, feeling like I have to go? I feel like I'm a bad mom, or even for partners to recognize that, for the dads to say, hey, and encourage. What can they do? Because they're, standing back watching. I know when we did our special, I had a ton of, partners and dads, messaging me saying, this is what my wife's going through. How do I help her?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. Right? Our partners are so concerned about us and this new baby, and they're not mental health experts.
Yeah.
Right? I think partners, one, being supportive, protecting that sleep, because we know sleep affects our mental health a lot. So they can do a lot on that piece, making sure we're eating. But partners need to say, like, you need to call your doctor.
Right.
And just say, I'm worried about you. Like, you don't seem happy. You seem like really stressed or anxious, you're not wanting to leave the house, or you're not sleeping. Like, partners need to feel empowered enough to say it's time to call the doctor.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think partners can be afraid to say that because it's like a judgment, but it's not a judgment. It's like it's a concern.
It's an act of love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Concern. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry, I had like a 2-part, the shame around it. How do you...
Gosh. Shame is one of those really, really tricky emotions, right? The biggest way that we get rid of our shame is we say it out loud, right? Like, I I had postpartum depression and anxiety after my fourth baby. And I'm pretty open about
Yeah,
that.
same. You know, it's like once that's out there, it's like, you know what? And yeah, you're right. The more you say it, like you just own it.
Yes.
There's no shame about that. And the more that you
No.
say that, there's so many women that have come up and said, "Thank you." They're not alone, because, you know, you don't want to suffer in silence, and it's so unfortunate how many do.
Right, exactly. So one, saying it out loud, acknowledging your suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have postpartum depression or anxiety, you are suffering. And suffering is not shame,
Mm-hmm.
right? We internalize that shame.
Yeah.
But when we say it out loud, that kind of softens it up, breaks it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we acknowledge that, like, we don't always have control over these things,
Yeah.
and that we did the best that we could in that moment, right? I think I didn't get treatment as quickly as I should have,
Mm-hmm.
and that was hard for me for a bit. And it was like, gosh, I didn't know I was suffering. I thought, like, I couldn't handle a fourth baby, you know? And it was like, oh my gosh. You know, like, I was a doula and a childbirth educator. I should have known, right? I should have known exactly what it was. But I just felt like I was failing as a mother.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment and in the throes of it, like, you're not thinking. And even some of your closest friends, or, you know, the in-laws, or even your parents, or, why didn't you ask, you know, let me know, let us know.
Yes.
It's like, I wasn't even on that planet.
No, and, you know,
You know?
everyone kept calling me supermom.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, supermom isn't, you know, failing or struggling, right? So there was like this piece of like, oh gosh, everyone thinks like I've got it together, and I don't at all. So yeah, it's, you know, the shame piece is tricky, but I think shame thrives in secrecy, right? And so we just have to put it out there.
Yeah. How can partners and family members support someone who is struggling? And, you know, you mentioned it by, like, saying it out loud. And what if it's the partner that doesn't want to say anything, or either friends, and they feel that they're going to upset the partner?
Yeah, I mean,
And I'm sure it might take some time. I mean, you've seen people probably come in and you've dealt with them. What's the thing that kind of gets them over the edge to get them in front of you to say, I do need some help?
yeah, I think, one, we wait too long. There are statistics that people that have depression of any sort, it takes almost 5 years to get help.
Wow.
So, yeah, we have a problem in our country with people seeking care. And I think you have to be afraid to say the thing. You can't be afraid, right? Like,
Yeah.
it might hurt your partner's feelings. It might cause a fight. But that is okay. Like, fights are okay in relationships, right? You have to say the thing out loud. So if the partner is like, oh gosh, she seems really sad or really anxious and fearful, like, you have to say those things out loud.
Yeah.
Right?
And,
like, we're afraid to say it.
and
right?
then there's different levels to it. I know we talked to a mom. There's the depression, there was anxiety, there's the psychosis. You know, it can get dark, but
it can. You know, postpartum psychosis is extremely rare, but it is also extremely dangerous. So that is like, you go straight to the emergency room type thing. It can't be, you know, you can't like will your way out of that. You know, you need really strong support for that. Very rare. And you can absolutely recover, you know.
Yeah.
All of these disorders you can recover from with support. Sometimes that's therapy, that's medication, that's really good sleep, sunlight, you know, all of those things can factor in. And I think when you talk about like your family or your partners, your friends, those are the things that like they can help you with. They can make sure you have childcare so you can go to your therapy. They can take an overnight shift so you can get a little more sleep. They can bring you meals, and then like make sure you're eating the meals too, you know? I remember thinking like after my fourth baby, like my mom had made me food and it was in the fridge, but like I could not get to the fridge.
Yeah.
And
oh man, the mom brain.
You know, it was like I had a 18-month-old and a newborn, and like feeding myself when I was trying to take care of the two of them was impossible.
Yeah.
And so there were times that I wouldn't eat all day until my husband got home and I could hand him, a baby or a baby and a toddler. So, dropping off the meals is lovely, but can you go inside and make sure that she eats the meal?
That is a good point. Certainly a good point. Resources. I know you were involved with Postpartum Support International. A lot of people may not know about that. So share. I know, and they're doing great things. We had a workshop, I think, last year.
We did.
You guys did.
Yeah. So that was lovely. I think about 70 providers attended that training. So every time that happens, that means we have more and more resources in our community. Postpartum Support International online, they have a support group for everyone, for partners, for new moms. They have them in Spanish. There's several different language options. There's one specific for depression, specific for anxiety. So if you go to postpartum.net, there is a support group for you. Additionally, they have a call line, and they will connect you with local resources. Jocelyn Riley is one of them for Alaska, and she'll text you and call you. So that's really great. Alaska Birth Collective has, perinatal therapists listed on it. Providence has a Monday Mamas support group that you can go to.
I looked forward to that every Monday.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes just getting out of the house, seeing other moms can be really helpful. Other resources, definitely start with your provider. If you feel like something maybe isn't right, call your provider and start there.
Living in Alaska, our winters are dark and cold, so that's one factor on top of already kind of dealing with it. To rural Alaska, how do you, get into that where, they're not as accessible? I mean, thank goodness now for telehealth and, the internet, but even then, that has to be hard sometimes.
Rural Alaska is really tricky, right? Because sometimes moms are flown in to either Fairbanks, Anchorage, or Juneau, right? So they're taken out of their community to give birth. Oftentimes alone, right? Their partner staying home with their other children. That is really, really tough. There is the Alaska Native Birth Workers Association. They provide doula support for anyone that is birthing at the Alaska Native Medical Center. There are some doula trainings that are going to be happening in the next couple of years for more rural folks that live out there, so that there can be doula support in those communities, which I think is really exciting, and so stay tuned for that. Delicia Young, who owns Due North Support Services, did the first Alaska doula training, her first one this past summer, and there were folks from kind of all around the state at that training. So there definitely are people that do this work and care very deeply about all Alaskans. Progress is slow, right? These things take a long time. I think the logistics of Alaska kind of make it tricky, but there are people doing this work that's really important work, and I think it's super important.
What are your thoughts on a mom who hasn't had the baby yet, whether it's their first or their second or third or whatever the case may be, to set up appointments or counseling, beforehand or while they're doing that versus after the fact? Is that an option?
Absolutely. So, you can go to therapy for a multitude of reasons, but I think during pregnancy to think about what are your values? What things bring you joy? What things bring you the most, make you feel the most alive, right? So identifying those things, really getting to know yourself, maybe addressing any things from the past. I think when you become a mother and then you see your child at different ages that you were, my youngest is 8. I'm when I was 8 is when I moved to Kodiak. The things that you experienced in your childhood, you see those through your children, right? So if something traumatic happened, right, a car accident, a loss, those things can bubble up in parenting. So addressing them before you're a parent, I mean, gosh, I think about if I would have gone to therapy earlier, like, I feel like such like a more whole person because I went to therapy and worked on some things that were kind of still hanging on.
Yeah.
So I think therapy is a lovely way to just like really connect with yourself, kind of identify like what's important to you and what, like how you want your life to look and how you want your parenting journey to look.
And I've said this in other podcast interviews with after COVID. I feel like the whole stigma around mental health is just kind of like we're normalizing it. I think we're on the right track. I still think there's a lot of work to be done. For the doula department, for folks who aren't quite sure how that works into a birth plan, is that somebody that you can have alongside and also have your birth at a hospital, or does that mean you have to be home? Kind of what's that role of a doula for someone who has no idea what that looks like?
So doulas go everywhere, right? Hospital, home birth, birth center. I feel like everyone needs a doula. Not to replace a partner, but to like support the partner as well. The way I like to explain it is like your partner is your person, right? They know you, they get you, you have that emotional connection. They can really be like a safety spot for you. And then I, as the doula, have all this like birth experience, labor knowledge. And so I can help with that piece. So you guys can focus on your connection. I can be pushing on your back if you're having back.
And you're like, what are these feelings? Because,
Yes. And so it really is additive. And I think about when you think about traditional birthing before it was medicalized, it was your sisters and your aunties. It was a community of your female family members that were supporting you. And when we sort of industrialized and medicalized birth, everyone left the room. And so partners have come back, right?
Yeah.
That was like in the 80s when partners started really going to births. But we left out all the sisters and the aunties and the cousins. And I think that is an important piece of birth. And so doulas are sort of like the modern version of that. Someone who's been through it or who has experienced it 100 times.
Yeah.
You don't have to... When you're in labor, you cannot be like an expert on something. You have to give all your energy to your labor and your birth. So the doula is there to support like all those little gaps.
I love that. No, that's a great way to put it. I didn't even think about it that way. What do you think Alaska needs as far as kind of like this topic in this realm that we're talking about? A lot of times we kind of feel like we get things last. We're the lower 48, then you have us, but it's also a community. I think that it's growing. What would you like to see? I mean, you're in it, day in and day out.
Absolutely. There are a few things that I think about. One is a community doula program, which has sort of been piloted in Alaska. But yeah, everyone deserves a doula. And if you can't afford one, there should be a program to pay for it. I think we probably need more perinatal mental health therapists. I think that we need a center that is maybe like really has more groups for postpartum moms or pregnant moms, more groups. I think there should be, it keeps going, right?
Yeah.
You need childcare, accessible childcare.
Yes.
All of these things affect our parenting, right? So there are a lot of things that we still need, like, systemically to support families. And I think they're all possible. There are states that provide doulas for whoever wants them, right?
Really?
And Medicaid reimburses. It's not a perfect system, but people are getting these things done. So I think that would be really helpful. I think like accessible childbirth education, right? I think we don't talk about birth still.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about birth. I always share this little story. My grandma is like in her late 80s. She still talks about her births.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And,
wow.
That our births, it's one day, right? But it stays with you forever.
It does.
Yeah.
I'm with that. What do you hope your impact is doing? Or, what do you want to kind of leave as your legacy, and where do you want to make the most impact in what you're doing?
Yeah. I have big dreams with Alaska Birth Collective. I do want to be a part of that. Free doulas for who needs them, more doula trainings. I also am kind of contemplating, like, how do I give free therapy to people? Yeah, so definitely I want to bring more resources to our community. I think that's super important. And I believe that individual therapy, one-on-one, right? If you can help one person heal, like, it reverberates throughout the community. So I don't want to, like, undervalue the work of that therapeutic relationship. I think if you can help someone, like, that is valuable.
Yeah.
Even if it's one person, right? I think that's valuable. So I try to keep that in mind. But I do have dreams for Alaska, and I hope to be a part of it. And there are a lot of wonderful organizations in Alaska doing this work too. So I think, there is a lot of room for growth, and I think there are really smart, capable people doing the work.
Yeah, and therapy's cool. I mean, if you're listening, take it from us. You may feel hesitant to go, and it may feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's normal because you're not growing, and you got to get out of your comfort zone. But I've found, and you have to find one that's right for you.
Absolutely.
That's going to take time. Don't just stop at the first one. I feel like a lot of people sometimes like, okay, well, I got here, I made the appointment, but I'm not really connecting. It's okay to not connect.
Absolutely.
Shop around.
Yes, there is a therapist for everyone.
When it clicks, it clicks.
Yes. You have to want to tell them all your, your secrets, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't feel comfortable with that person, you need to move on to the next one. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
If you could leave parents with one piece of advice about prioritizing their mental health during pregnancy and postpartum, what would it be?
Yeah, I think parents, the focus is so much on the newborn, which is super important, right? These babies are helpless. They're just like these little potato sacks of love, But you're an individual with really important needs that need to be met. And there has to be a balance of, taking care of the baby, taking care of yourself, taking care of your relationship, right? I think transition from like a couple to a family, that is
a big one.
Big one. And we don't talk about that one either. So really, like, nurturing that relationship is really important. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. You're taking care of a newborn. You're sleep deprived. And you have to nurture your relationship.
Yeah. And see, I have a 9-year-old about to be 10. You have 4, and you've been in this game up longer. And you're still mom at your 23-year-old, you had mentioned. Like, you're at different stages.
Absolutely.
You're never not mom.
That's right. And, I have a 23-year-old, I have a 14-year-old, and 9, almost 10, and an 8-year-old,
Wow.
So I'm finally, out of like the baby preschool age, but you're mom forever, for sure. But also I'm me forever.
Yeah.
So I have to take care of me. And I can't be the best mom that I can be if I'm suffering.
Yeah. That's key, that part right there. Well, that's all I had. I know this is such a wonderful topic, and thank you so much for sharing. 2 things real quick. How can folks get in contact with you? What's the best way? What do you offer?
Absolutely. So morganturnertherapy.com is my website. You can shoot me an email. My number's on there. And then alaskabirthcollective.org is the website for the nonprofit, which is being revamped. We're building a whole new website to kind of update and go with our refresh, and I'm really excited to get that launched pretty soon.
And if you're listening, you're not sure where to go, reach out, because you can point folks in the right direction of what they need, resource-wise.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be a resource, and I'm happy to connect people.
And lastly, I like to give my guests the final thought, say, word, advice, whatever you feel or it's on your heart, anything you want to mention or say that I didn't ask, or just, you want to leave our listeners with something.
Yeah, I think the most important message, which is sort of like the PSI motto, is that, like, with help, you will get better. You will be okay. And the struggle does not last forever.
Yeah. All right. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for sharing. This was a lot of fun. You dropped a lot of great nuggets, and I hope, you continuing the great work that you're doing. It's so needed, and so thank you for sharing that.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. Don't forget to like and subscribe.